G'day Poetry Geeks, I'm Jackson and you are watching The Poetry Show, and in today's Poetry Show I will quickly read to you Ulysses by Alfred Lord Tennyson and then discuss it. Now, as I read this poem, you have to imagine that I am standing before you and my nation, all of the people that I rule over, in my full, resplendent, regal glory, which is often how I imagine myself. So, Ulysses. It little profits that an idle king, by this still hearth and barren crags, matched with an aged wife, I mete and dole unequal laws unto a savage race, that hoard and sleep and feed, and know not me. I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees. All times I have enjoyed greatly, suffered greatly, both with those that loved me and alone, on shore, and when through scudding drifts the rainy Hyades vex the dim sea, I am become a name. For always roaming with a hungry heart, much have I seen and known. Cities of men and manners, climates, councils, governments, myself not least, but honoured of them all, and drunk delight of battle with my peers, far on the ringing plains of windy Troy. I am a part of all that I have met, yet all experience is an arch wherethrough gleams that untravelled world, whose margin fades for ever and for ever when I move. How dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in use. As though to breathe were life, life piled on life were all too little, and of one to me little remains. But every hour is saved from that eternal silence, something more, a bringer of new things, and vile it were for some 3 suns to store and hoard myself and this grey spirit yearning in desire to follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bound of human thought. This is my son, mine own Telemachus, to whom I leave the sceptre in the isle, well loved of me, discerning to fulfil this labour, by slow prudence to make mild a rugged people, and through soft degrees subdue them to the useful and the good. Most blameless is he, centred in the sphere of common duties, decent not to fail in offices of tenderness, and pay meet adoration to my household gods when I'm gone. He works his work, I mine. There lies the port. The vessel puffs her sail. There gloom the dark, broad seas. My mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and fought with me, that ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine and opposed free hearts, free foreheads. You and I are old. Old age hath yet his honour and his toil. Death closes all. But something ere the end, some work of noble note may yet be done, not unbecoming men that strove with gods. The lights begin to twinkle from the rocks. The long day wanes, the slow moon climbs. The deep moans round with many voices. Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off, and sitting well in order, smite the sounding furrows, for my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die. It may be that the gulfs will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isle and see the great Achilles whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved heaven and earth, that which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Okay, well that's a bloody good poem, isn't it? I don't know where to start with this poem. I mean, even just reading it, when you really read it, when you read it properly and you feel the meaning of what he's saying, it just resonates, I think, through your bones as you say it. You can't help but feel like a king who's about to go off on some tremendous and suicidal journey. And on that note, a cup of tea. So Ulysses is someone who obviously, if you know the Greek myths and that kind of thing, I'm about as far from Ulysses as I could imagine anyone being. I do not have a heroic bone in my body, and yet there is something about this poem that I think transcends the heroism and the nobility of a character like Ulysses, and it finds itself in the lives and the spirit of any human. I think it really speaks to the human condition, even though it's talking about someone who is, by the standards of myth, a superhuman. And I think the thing that's really quite amazing about this poem is that humanizing of this mythic, godlike figure. As he says himself, he strove with gods. And in hearing his melancholy and his dissatisfaction with life, in hearing his disappointment that his life slowed down, that it changed, that he was not the hero that he was known to be for his entire life. If you've read Beowulf, in that wonderful epic poem, in Beowulf you get to see the young Beowulf kill Grendel, kill Grendel's mother, do these fantastic feats, but then he goes off to be the king of the Geats at one point. He lives out the rest of his life being fair and diplomatic and a good king. Beowulf is a good king. You get the idea that Ulysses is a good king. And yet when we get to the end of Beowulf, he faces the dragon and he dies this incredibly heroic, brave death, fighting a dragon barehanded. And you kind of get the sense that is the way a king like Beowulf is supposed to die. Beowulf was never going to die quietly in his sleep. And I think the thing about Ulysses is Ulysses thinks he might. Ulysses is worried he's going to die in his sleep. And his life has become a different kind of toil, a different kind of work that he never really signed up for in the hero game. So he's a fair king and he does what he does. He meets and doles unequal laws unto a savage race. He kind of despises the people he rules over. He, by his own admission, is unequal in the laws that he gives. So he sees the bureaucracy and the mundane nature of the ruling that he presides over, and he decides that that's not for him. Instead, he wants to get back out on the sea and sail to where somebody has never sailed before. And he's going to take a bunch of old men with him who similarly do not quite like peace in the way it's come to them. And I think, I can't really see myself in that aspect of it, but I think everybody can appreciate this idea that what they maybe stood for in their youth, or maybe what they feel was the thing that kind of gave fire and excitement to their life in their younger years, isn't something you can sustain long term. Now, I happen to think that that's a good thing. The stuff that put a fire in my belly when I was 20 years old, if I was still harping on about that stuff, I would be quite a boring and insufferable person. Part of growing up is knowing what fights not to fight and what dragons not to slay. But having said that, there is also sometimes this feeling that you get, I think, where you have a mortgage and you have the mundanity of making lunch for your toddler again and again and again every day, and she refuses to eat it, and you have the 9 to 5 job where you punch in and out, and maybe you find your work fulfilling, or maybe it's just a paycheck. But you get this idea that that's what your life becomes, and maybe you might, when you are in your 70s or 80s, decide, like Ulysses, enough is enough. I need one more adventure, and whatever that adventure looks like for you, whether it's the 70-year-old who decides he's going to go out clubbing one last time, or the 70-year-old who is going to go into a mosh pit because that's what he was like in his 20s. I think there's that idea of that sense of loss of youth and that loss of vigour in the poem, and I think to some degree, wisely or not, we all feel an aspect of that at some point in our life. I think there is no uncertain amount of folly being described in this poem as well. You can never really tell with poetry what position you're supposed to take on the voice and the actions of the character within the poem. Whether Ulysses is being presented by Tennyson as someone who is, being foolish. You can't know. But I like to think that maybe Tennyson is maybe suggesting that as heroic and as wonderful as this sounds, it is also a little foolish for a man like him to throw away the remains of his life in such a way. And I also like the description of his son, whom he professes to love. His son is well loved of me. And he talks about his slow prudence to make mild or rugged people, and through soft degrees subdue them to the useful and the good. All of those things, it's kind of like this slow creeping bureaucracy, this slow creeping civilization of a savage people, as he calls them. I think we live in that world. We live in that world that is, through soft degrees, subduing us to the useful and the good. I would probably say we're not even being subdued to the good anymore. It's just the useful. We live in this kind of neoliberal economic landscape where everything is measured by its utility, and everything is measured against what it contributes to the bottom line, what it contributes to the bottom line of the economy. And I think that is a way in which we have been subdued. And I think that is a dangerous thing, particularly here in Australia at the moment, where we have there's a current hashtag on Twitter called freethearts, where we are currently seeing funding cuts to art and literature and poetry and all those things, in a way that's not looking good for Australian art. And it's the Liberal government are presiding over this at the moment, and it's a real shame, because at its heart it's based on this premise that art and poetry and literature is trivial and it's frivolous and it's not something that should be taken seriously. And that's true if the measuring stick you use is how much money does this bring in for transnational corporations. If you measure it by how many jobs does this add to the economy. So maybe that's to some extent true, that by that measure it's trivial. And yet the essence of poetry and the essence of art has always been about engaging with the human spirit, engaging with the human condition, giving us the language and the tools and the imagery and the symbolism to make sense of the world in which we live, to make sense of suffering, to make sense of heartache, to make sense of all sorts of troubles that money alone cannot solve. And I think in downplaying the importance of art and downplaying the importance of poetry and slaying it on the altar of neoliberal education policy, neoliberal economic policy, we are in danger of losing something quite important. And I think I stopped talking about Ulysses. But this is going to have to be a different video. Anyway, I will rant about that in another video. Don't worry, we'll get back to that. So anyway, you've got Telemachus on the one hand, the useful and the good. Reminds me of Auden's Apollo, the sons of Apollo, who love to think their work important, never shirk from boring work, but have to think their work important or something like that. Anyway, I completely lost track of what I was saying about this poem. The other thing about this poem, you've probably heard this poem, maybe not in its entirety, but you've probably heard snippets of it. It was included on the final episode of Frasier many years ago when Frasier finished, and Frasier Crane sits in his office and he reads a portion of Ulysses. It was included in a reasonably recent, possibly not Spectre, but the one before Spectre, I forgot the name of it. It was mentioned in one of the Bond movies anyway. M has this wonderful bit where she takes those final lines, we are not that strength we once were, to seek to never to yield, that bit, and then, terrorists come in and start shooting everybody. So Ulysses is one of those poems that pops up again and again and again, because it's just fantastic. It really just captures something, I think, in people's imaginations. Anyway, I've talked too long. I've talked far too long about this poem. I love it. I love ranting about neoliberalism, and I will probably do a separate video on that. Anyway, I've been rambling for too long. If you've enjoyed this video and you would like to see more discussion of particular poems, or you would like to learn how to write your own poems with a little bit more style, flair and panache, then please subscribe. If there are particular poems you'd like me to comment on, then please leave me a comment and I will get around to them eventually. If there are particular areas of the place of poetry in modern society you would like me to wax lyrical and start ranting about, then just give me a nudge and I will start, as you can probably tell from the way this video went off in a weird direction. Anyway, thanks for watching and I will catch you next time. Rambling.